Crunchbird, my ass.
I'm only 4. Bonjour, Monsieur Pussycat.
Cracking toast, Robert.
Start spreading the news.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the short podcast about short films. I'm your host, and we are discussing the Academy Award for Best Animated Short. Today's episode is about the 40th year of the award at the 44th Academy Awards, which celebrates the films of 1971. Today's guest is appearing for the 5th time, first guest ever to do that for the show, last being heard on the pod talking about the dot and the line in the nominees of 1965. Please welcome back our dear friend Christof. Hello, Christof.
Crunchbird, my ass.
Just getting right into it.
Yeah, let's just. How else should we start the show? And I know you're starting every episode with this wonderful line, and finally we get to talk about the film that started it. And if you, dear listener, are wondering why every single episode begins with Crunchbird, my ass, at some point in this wonderful opening bit, today we're finally going to talk about it.
Yes, we will get there. Let me just go through my formalities first, though. So first, remind us, what is your familiarity with the Best Animated Short category?
I love the Best Animated Short category. I've seen every single one that's available. I love many of the lineups. I'm always excited about this. In recent years, I'm trying to watch every single film on the short list before the nominations are announced, which is why I was very happy that this year an Ostrich Told Me the World is Fake, and I believe it made the nominations. So what was your question again?
Just your overall familiarity. You answered the question.
Very good.
But yeah, an Ostrich Told Me the World is Fake, and I believe it. Maybe not my favorite nominee of last year, or this year, I guess. But certainly the best title, maybe in the entire category. Fantastic titling, and a very unique short too.
Fantastic title, fantastic short.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads us to the Crunchbird.
Yes, let's get into these nominees. This year has 3. Our first nominee and the year's winner is The Crunchbird, directed by Ted Peacock. I think that's how you pronounce it. Some fun facts about this short film. It is the shortest Oscar winner in any category and was the shortest nominee ever at the time of its nomination, and to this day remains the 4th shortest nominee ever, behind only Pixar's Luxo Jr., The Big Story, and the current record holder, Fresh Guacamole by Pez. Also, the image that I use as the main picture for this podcast, as well as Christof mentioned, a little soundbite in the intro to this podcast, is from this short film, and the picture is of the titular Crunchbird, I might add. It is also considered one of the worst winners, not just in this category, but to ever win an Oscar. However, that's getting a bit ahead of myself. We need to build up to this. Let's talk about Ted Peacock first, the man responsible for this. He got his start in newspaper cartoons and advertising in the 1930s before joining the army in World War II and earning the rank of captain somehow. Post-war, Peacock turned his sights towards animation, notably joining the studio run by previous record holder for shortest winner and nominee, Ernest Pintoff. But in the late 60s, Peacock started his own studio based in his hometown of Detroit, and thus the Crunchbird is born. It was originally called Ted Peacock Studios, but changed it to Crunchbird Studios after this film's success. The studio did make many more short films, including a sequel to The Crunchbird, as well as many commercials and many educational segments for Sesame Street and the Electric Company. But in terms of the Oscars, this is the only nomination and win for Ted Peacock. Enough about him, let's talk about the film at hand. The Crunchbird starts with a woman looking for a birthday present for her miserable husband. She wanders into a pet store and discovers the Crunchbird. The pet store owner says the pet is, however, too dangerous, demonstrating its talents by saying, "Crunchbird, the chair," and the bird proceeds to eat the chair. The wife is, however, undeterred and perhaps even more excited by the prospect of owning this Crunchbird, and buys it for her husband. When the husband gets home from a long day of hating everything, including and especially his wife, he is enraged to see his wife has wasted more money on a bird. She exclaims, "It's a crunch bird," to which the husband replies, "Crunch bird, my ass." Christoph, what do you think of the crunch bird?
Well, I think we have to set the table first. We're talking about the 1971 Academy Awards. The 1971 Academy Awards is when Jane Fonda won her first Oscar for Clute. Ben Johnson and Cloris Leachman won Oscars for The Last Picture Show. Other winners include the theme from Shaft. So we have a year which has picked some iconic winners that have lasted over decades and decades, and we still cherish today as some of the best in the history of the Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
And we got this.
Yes, we do have this. They have the French Connection and this.
It's baffling to watch this film and think that this somehow won an Oscar, because there's absolutely nothing to it that is remotely good. It is a joke. It is one joke with another little joke about stupid woman always buying stuff that her husband is paying for, crammed into 2 times. The animation is ugly.
Very.
It feels unfinished. I mean, we're in the pet shop, and basically there are no backgrounds. It's just in front of a white background. We're later in the home of these people. There's also a white background. There's a door in the middle of a white background. The characters are ugly. The voices are badly made. One guy making all the voices. The bird is just some guy doing the sounds.
Yeah.
I wonder how on earth anyone ever thought that this should be on the Oscar stage. If a variety sketch show in the 1970s would have rejected this for being too sloppy and not funny enough. I don't understand it. At one point, the husband calls the crunchbird that ugly thing, although the crunchbird itself is one of the best things about the entire short. Mm-hmm. It's certainly one of the most detailed ones. Not that it's particularly good in itself. It's just baffling. I don't understand it. There are a lot of bad winners in the history of the Oscars. Also in the short categories, there are winners that are awful. I mean, just look at live action short. But I still understand how something like, say, Skin wins an Oscar, because Skin is awful, terrible, and woefully misguided. But I understand how someone could watch Skin and think, oh, this is so meaningful and has something to say, let's give it an Oscar. I don't understand how anyone would ever watch The Crunchbird and think, yes, this is funny, this is beautiful, this is great, this is Oscar-worthy. I simply don't understand it.
So I agree with many of your thoughts. Like, this is clearly, very bad, very poorly animated, very poorly voice acted. Like, it is hard to listen to, just listening to this man do just terrible voices. But I also understand how this could win an Oscar, because the main thing is this is a joke, and this is a very 1970s kind of joke, and I can understand a person just watching this and being like, oh, that was funny, and then just like voting for it, because it's the one good thing about this short is the fact that it is very short. It is only slightly over 2 minutes long, and that's including credits also. And it's just that, like, I did the math, and you could watch this short 15 times in the time it takes to watch the other 2 nominees, because the other 2 are 10 minutes and nearly half an hour. So that is a very good virtue of it, the fact that it is so short, and it's what prevents me from saying that this is like the worst film to ever win an Oscar, even the worst winner in this category, just because it is so easy to watch. It is very bad, but it's also only 2 minutes, and it's just like you're not losing that much of your lifespan wasting on this short by just watching it. It's not something like to go back to the most recent Oscars, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, which is 30 minutes long, and it is equally painful to sit through. And I would much rather watch this again than I would to watch The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse again. And because it's just so painful to sit through. It was hard just sitting watching that short once. Meanwhile, I feel like I could watch The Crunchbird multiple times and not really hate myself, but still just kind of hate this.
So you're basically comparing the Crunchbird to being slapped in the face because it's painful, but at least it's over soon.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I can agree with you that the best thing about the Crunchbird is that it's over soon enough. I mean, you don't have to pay attention to it. I mean, we told you the joke already. You don't really have to watch it because we told you really everything about it. The only reason to watch the Crunchbird after this is to make sure that we're really not lying to you. It's really that bad and simple and basic. It's yeah, it's over soon. That's the only good thing about it. It's not telling more jokes. I mean, that's what the Crunchbird 2 is for. The Crunchbird 2, by the way, spoiler alert, there's no Crunchbird in the Crunchbird 2. I don't remember a single other thing about it, and I didn't rewatch it for this. But the one thing is, it only takes the name the Crunchbird 2 without having anything to do with the short. It's, as far as I remember, it's just another joke. Am I right about this?
I also didn't rewatch it, but I do remember that the Crunchbird 2 is worse than the Crunchbird, in my opinion, at least. It's equally poorly animated, equally poorly voice acted. It's just worse. And it's also, I think it's like 6 minutes long. So there it goes, taking the one good thing about the Crunchbird and ruining it. Therefore, it is worse.
Yeah.
But honestly, I would recommend watching The Crunchbird because it's kind of earned this kind of like mythic quality, at least among us and among other people who know about this category. He just, for how bad it is, and also it's kind of similar to a later winner, A Sunday in New York, which is also equally considered like one of the worst winners in Academy history. And I think that has a lower rating on Letterboxd than the Crunchbird does. But still, it's so bad that it's like you need to see it to believe it. And it's I enjoy talking about the Crunchbird.
I mean,
it's such a unique thing.
I must admit, I just said you don't have to watch it. To be honest, The Crunchbird is one of the 2 films I tend to tell people to watch when they are starting to watch a category because I want them to watch the best and the worst of the category. And The Crunchbird is representing the worst of the category. Mm-hmm. I'm not telling yet what the best of the category is. I think I'm going to be on that episode as well. So
you definitely are.
At some point in the future, I'm going to promise you at some point in the future, there will be a short that I will be gushing about. But I usually tell people, and the main reason I tell them to watch it is because it's so short. I mean, even if you have a really short attention span, you're going to get through this. And the only reaction I usually get is people absolutely baffled at the fact that this is an Oscar-winning short.
Mm-hmm. It is truly a sight to behold, and it's just like, and you mentioned how like the Crunchbird itself is probably the best thing designed in this short. I really like the design of the Crunchbird. That's another thing I like about it. I think the Crunchbird itself is it's almost cute in a way, just by how ugly it is. It's kind of like the Eraserhead baby. Yeah. In that it is definitely ugly. It is definitely poorly drawn, but at the same time, that is why I think it's kind of cute.
Also, what kind of a pet shop has dogs, cats, a monkey on a swing, and an ugly bird? These are the things that are possible to buy in this pet shop.
It's like an exotic pet shop where it's just like where you can find like I don't know, like it's a black market pet shop, let's say.
Yeah,
probably
we
find tigers in there.
We have to be told that the thing on the swing is a monkey because I wouldn't have recognized it. Also, I think we only see it from behind because I guess it's easier to draw a monkey from behind.
I guess. This short is a monkey's behind, am I right?
Yeah.
I'm laughing at my own joke. And it's funnier
Well,
than the joke.
it's a better joke than Crunchbird.
We're going to make the same joke.
I mean, it literally says, Crunchbird, my ass.
And speaking of which, I do enjoy how, like, when Ted Petog went to accept his Oscar, the first thing he says is "Crunchbird, my Oscar," which is something that, like, I think many people would agree with the sentiment with, that, like, the Crunchbird should just chomp up his Oscar because he doesn't deserve it. Although I have heard that Ted Petog is a quite kind man. He's not with us anymore, but from like the memorial page, the comments under it, like, people seem to regard him fondly, and seem to regard the short fondly as well. Like, there's a lot of people who call this short just, like, very funny, which, different strokes for different folks.
I mean, I have to admit, the Crunchbird is iconic. There's a reason we're talking about it for I don't know how long already. Much longer than the short actually lasts.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean, so
definitely.
this is the one thing we have to say. The Crunchbird is, for better or worse, an icon.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how many shorts, like what the ratio is for how long we talk about a short versus how long the short actually is. I imagine we tend to go longer than the short itself, but sometimes I feel like we must go shorter.
I hope we're talking not as long about The Selfish Giant as it lasts, but we will see. I mean, I think with shorter shorts, it's probably more likely to go excessively longer. I mean, Fresh Guacamole is likely to exceed this when you're going to it at some point, because Fresh Guacamole is really short.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's quite a bit. Although the Crunchbird is nothing but a bad joke, obviously there's a lot to unpack. Just to get back to how baffled we are, or at least how baffled I am, that this won an Oscar. And it's so bad and not funny and ugly.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of comparisons that we can make to, like, other categories in terms of, like, winners that are so bad that they're almost iconic, like something like Elizabeth Taylor in Butterfield 8, or things like that.
But I think that's doing an injustice to Elizabeth Taylor in Butterfield 8, because she's genuinely, I mean, the opening scene of Butterfield 8 is a miracle, a marvel. It's wonderful in itself. Too bad the rest of the film happens. But the opening scene of Butterfield 8 is so much better than anything remotely like Crunchbird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm trying to think of other iconically bad winners, but it's just like, usually when there's a winner that's bad, it tends to be just, universally hated. There's no real kind of, let's say, camp factor, though maybe that term is wasted on the Crunchbird. But yeah, I don't know. Can you think of anything that's a proper comparison for those who are a bit, let's say, uneducated into this category?
Rami Malek in Bohemian Rhapsody, maybe?
That tends to lean towards, universally hated.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. Anything else you have to say about this short?
I think we said so much. I mean, I'm kind of surprised I didn't really make a rant about this.
Yeah.
But it's just I'm more baffled than really angry at it. So it's just, yeah, it's I mean, I must admit, it's iconic in its own way, but it's just bad. So.
Yeah, it's just like, it's not like a pure hatred that you get out of, let's say, Minnie Mouse or Tweety Bird.
Yeah, because maybe the reason is Minnie Mouse and Tweety Bird are for some reason beloved by many people, and I'm part of the reason I can rant about them is the fact that so many people love them and I don't understand it. I don't understand why the Crunchbird won an Oscar, but we cannot say that the Crunchbird is beloved by people. I don't think anyone loves this movie.
Or at least we haven't met them.
It loves them unironically.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you are a big fan of the Crunchbird, please reach out. Please DM me on Twitter or DM the podcast on Twitter and tell us like why you love this movie and why the haters are wrong. Or
Yes,
not even.
so we can make fun of you.
No, I'm more open-minded than Christof is. If you have genuine admiration for this, let me know. We can have a nice discussion. And maybe not Christof, maybe keep him out of it, but I will be open to your opinions. Okay, that's a good place to move on. So
Yeah.
our second nominee is Evolution, directed by Michael Mills. This is the first nomination for Mills and the 8th nomination for the National Film Board of Canada. Can't find too much about Mills. He was born in London, but seems to mainly work in Canada. He worked with NFB for some time, including on this short film, eventually making his own self-titled animation studio. And he is fortunately still alive. He turning 81 this past January. Onto the film at hand, Evolution, as its title suggests, depicts the evolution of life from single-celled organisms in the ocean to complex organisms on land. I thought this was pretty good. I thought it's a bit boring. I'll start there. It is a bit boring. It lasts for 10 minutes, and it's trying to be funny, I guess. I guess in similar to Crunchbird, it is trying to be funny and fails at that. It is like it tries to do these kind of like slapstick kind of gags with the different organisms or whatever, or in the different stages of complex life, I guess. But none of the jokes really land. I enjoy the creature designs. They feel almost reminiscent of the game Spore. If you've played that, Christof, is just like these just generic kind of blobs of like eyes and limbs, and I get and they're both also about evolution stuff. So maybe that's why my mind goes there. It is certainly colorful too. It is well animated, but it's just kind of boring. It doesn't do much with its 10, 11 minutes.
I mean, I have never played sports, so I don't have that reference point. What I have to say about Evolution is it's fine. It's fine, but I'm kind of surprised that I don't like it more because this is the kind of thing I should be enjoying. And I mean, the last time I was on your show, we were talking about Clay or the Origin of Species, which has
Yes.
a very similar concept to this, and which we both loved a lot because it seemed to be really, really representing the idea of evolution. This one is fine, as you said, it's a bit long. It's also not really sticking to the concept of evolution because half the time we don't see one creature evolving to the next in the next generation, but one creature which is suddenly being eaten by another creature we've never seen before. So I'm not really sure it does exactly what it says it's doing. At the beginning, we see amoeba becoming cells and turning into algae and then turning into plants, and suddenly then there's a fish and there's another fish eating the fish and one character's going on the land. It's very colorful, but most of the time I was watching this and thinking I should be enjoying this. I usually like this sort of thing where one concept is getting developed with ever so slightly new things, but I don't really enjoy this, which is a bit of a shame because it's colorful, the creatures look good. There's at some moments it loses its rhythm. Like for the first time, when the first creature goes on land, it feels like it suddenly stops a bit, and the rhythm with one creature eating the other is suddenly gone. It feels it has potential to be better. At least it looks great. It looks colorful and has funny creatures. Also, there's an interesting thing about the female characters because the main way it differentiates between male and female characters is that the female characters have boobs.
Yeah.
And the first female character we see the creature design is a bit strange because it's basically a head with a beak and two legs coming directly from the head. And so the first character with boobs we see, from the placement of the boobs, they could also theoretically be testicles. So the main reason we realize that this is a woman with boobs rather than a man with giant testicles is the fact that A, the character has eyelashes, and B, the character behaves in somewhat effeminate way. So this is something that suddenly that female characters it's kind of strange. Also, there's one moment one of the female characters lays a bunch of eggs, and these eggs hatch, and they're small creatures that look like their parents, except for one which looks different, and then gets crushed by the father character. But later we don't see these characters anymore anyway. There's a through line that's missing, because it kind of more feels like we're getting new characters replacing the characters we had so far. This feels like if it had stuck a bit more to the concept of actual evolution, it might have been more interesting, more to my liking. So it's more this thing of, yeah, it's fine. It does things I like. It looks nice, but it's somehow lacking a certain something for me.
Okay, I'm going to comment on multiple things you said. So it's like, first, I the trope of like animators just insisting on very clearly defining the fact that, like, no, these aren't gay creatures, or there's one of them's a woman, and the way to define that is by eyelashes, and maybe making them pink, or giving them a bow, or in this case just giving them big old tits, is truly one of the best worst things in animation. It is so funny to notice just how frequent it is, but it's also, like, come on, animators, just give up on it. Just let creatures be, more realistic, or it's just like the male and female don't have that much distinctive characteristics. But homophobia wins or whatever. I don't know.
Imagine the dot and the line, and the dot has boobs.
or like the squiggle just has a very distinct penis or something. uh, oh, that's funny. Second, I'm very glad you brought up the joke where it's just like where it's like all the different babies or the creatures are hatching out of the eggs, and they all look like the dad except one that's like green or something. And it's just like, I first thought it was going to be a joke about how like how like the wife or whatever was like sleeping around or something, and because it reminded me of a similar joke in The Ugly Duckling, a previous winner in this category, the Disney short, where it's just like the two ducks are very clearly like accusing the mother, where it's just like with like sleeping around with another duck or whatever. Um, but then the dad just like crushes the odd child. It's like, and then it moves on, and like from that it's just like, that's dark. That's really dark, because it's like, if you were to like put that into like, human terms or whatever, it seems like finding out that your child has like some kind of birth defect or turns out disabled or something, and then euthanizing it before it can grow up. It's just like, Jesus Christ, that's fucked up. But maybe my mind's just like thinking too much into it. It is just meant to be a throwaway joke in this series, in this short that is just a series of throwaway jokes. But
It also goes against the idea of evolution, because the one thing it is probably supposed to say is how these creatures evolve and get different from generation to generation. And here you have a moment of the next generation actually evolving, and woof, it's erased immediately.
yeah, it would have been interesting to like, if it did like follow this one family, how like that child would be like uh developing these evolutionary advantages or whatever, and it passes those on to its children or whatever. It'd be an interesting thing to do, but I guess this Mr. Mike Mills didn't think of that. And also, going back to how you were comparing this to a play on the origin of species, this also reminded me of another better short called, and also from NFB, From the Big Bang to Tuesday Morning, which is a very much more like I guess more like artistic, or like it tries to be like like literally portraits of like the different stages of evolution, and it's just like that one it's like half the length, and two it's kind of like a montage of like the history of the world, of the history of the universe, from, like the title suggests, from Big Bang to Tuesday morning, aka like modern time. And that one I just watched it on YouTube randomly because it was in my YouTube recommendations, and I really liked the title, so I just watched it and completely fell in love with it. I thought it was just fantastic. And so yeah, the best thing about this short is that it reminds you of better short films.
Very well put.
Also the game Spore. Anything else you'd like to say about this?
Maybe two things.
Go
Number
ahead.
one, I think technically this short has sex scenes, or at least one sex scene, because there's a very weird way to represent sex where one strange creature blows into his wife's nose and children are popping out, I believe, of her ears. So I think technically this is a sex scene.
Oh yeah, and like earlier on, there's like an asexual reproduction scene, I believe, too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're going there. Also, should we spoil the ending?
Sure, why not? Nobody's gonna watch this except for Owen. Hello,
Yeah.
Owen.
And Owen, so maybe if you really want to watch the ending unspoiled, press pause now. We'll hear you back in 10 minutes.
I think they watch the shorts before they come listen to the episode anyway.
Okay, so here we're back. Suddenly there's an alien in the last minute, and the alien is flying towards the Earth. So apparently this is showing that this is happening on some other planet, and one of the creatures ends up in a spaceship and landing on the Earth, and then the Earth is eaten by another creature, which is a kind of strange way to end the short. At least the eating of the Earth is kind of strange, but also the fact that is revealing for no real reason at all that this is at the end developing into an alien. It's something that doesn't really make sense and just feels like an odd afterthought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a throwaway joke ending that doesn't really, think about itself too much, which is really just this whole short film. It just wants to make jokes involving evolution, and just it's a solid short film, but at the end, it's just like it could have been so much better. It could have been so much more interesting, like other short films about evolution are, but it just isn't. But it's still better than the Crunch Bird.
Yeah. And let's hope that the next short we're talking about does not have a very weird ending that I tagged onto it.
Okay, well, we'll get there. So our third and final nominee is The Selfish Giant, directed by Peter Sander. This is the first and only nominations for Gerald Potterton and Peter Sander, although Gerald Potterton is not an unfamiliar name for us, as Potterton was formerly an animator for NFB and directed 2 previous Oscar nominees, My Financial Career and a segment of Christmas Cracker. Post NFB, Potterton formed Potterton Productions and made many adaptations of children's stories, including collaborating with co-nominee Michael Mills on The Happy Prince, as well as today's nominated film, The Selfish Giant, which is based on a story by Oscar Wilde. The film is about, well, a giant whom, when returning from vacation, finds children playing in the garden of his castle, and thus forbids anyone from entering his garden afterwards. The children now have nowhere to play, and the garden becomes dead and desolate, creating an eternal winter. The giant now must not only learn to stop being selfish, but convince the children not to fear him anymore. Christof, what did you think of The Selfish Giant?
Well, first of all, we're talking about the best animated short category, so imagine my surprise that we're talking suddenly about a film that is about 2 hours long, or at least feels that long.
It's barely under 30 minutes.
But it feels like 2 hours. Also, you previously mentioned the boy, the mole, the fish, and the honey badger, or whatever.
Fox and the horse.
Same thing. This short sort of reminded me of that one in the way that it is very obviously aimed at children. That other one has much better animation. I find this one has a bit more meat on its bones, but I sort of feel, or maybe it's just the fact that both are excessively long is the reason that it reminded me of that, but I somehow had to think of that one, because Selfish Giant is an Oscar Wilde story read out, and a hardcore Christian allegory. That really amps up on the Christian allegory in the last 2 minutes it has. As a narrative, it's rather simplistic. At times it feels a bit like you're listening to an audiobook with some animation to it. Also, some of the animation isn't very good, especially the characters, the humans, especially the kids. They look rather bland, I would say.
Mhm.
The other stuff there's some other animation that's very good to it, but the characters themselves, the kid characters don't look great, and it's just long. At some point, it stops to bring us an incredibly boring and forgettable song. It's like someone tried to be Simon and Garfunkel or Cat Stevens, but tried to make it bland. It's about the giant building a wall around his castle. The song is roughly as long as the entirety of the Crunch Bird, and it has lyrics which are super obvious, like you're a fool if you think you can live your life without sharing sunshine and gladness. If you think you can live without love, you're building a wall of sorrow and madness.
Oh, it's so cliche.
Yeah. However, at the middle of the film, it suddenly becomes really good. At the center, I really love the center of this film when the Selfish Giant has erected a wall around his castle and doesn't let the children come in to play anymore. And as a consequence of this, he has an eternal winter because Spring doesn't want to go into his garden because there are no kids there. So there's just an eternal winter, and then the snow and the frost and the north wind and the hail come. The snow is a lady with a white fur coat and a long train, and the frost is an old man who's painting all the trees white, and the north wind looks like a Norse god, and the hail is a medieval knight in full armor who's tap dancing on his roof. And this looks exciting. It feels interesting, and this middle section of the film is actually great, and I really liked it, and I found it a bit of a shame that beginning and the end is happening before and after it, because after a while, suddenly a bit of spring is here because the children come through the wall overnight, and it's getting spring. And there's one particular child who cannot climb onto a tree, and he's helping him on the tree, and everything is good again. And the film is suddenly getting bland again. And I think there's another song we're listening to. And then that ending happens, which is really strange. Do you want to talk about the ending a bit, or do you want to talk about other things first?
Let's build up to the ending. I want to say a few things. So I find it really weird how this film, like it's clearly made to be like this 30-minute television special, where and it's produced by Reader's Digest or whatever, and it's just like I find it weird how like it clearly is trying to pad itself out to be this 30 minutes, but also I find it like to be rushing through a lot of like what could be interesting plot elements, like the fact that so the part you were saying about how the children sneak into his castle, his garden, and through a little hole in the wall, and then just immediately the giant is like, "Oh, I've been so rude to these children, and let me go down and help them, and let tear down my wall." And it's just like in most good like children's stories, fairy tales or whatever, or it would be like the giant slowly like overcomes like his hatred of the children, and it's just like he first encounters the little boy and first scares him off, but then later on he comes again, and it's just like, oh, okay, now I'll help you into the tree. And then he sees like what the child does, and spring is back, and it's like, oh, this is good. But then but yeah, it just rushes through to like this point, and then of course it just pads itself out with the long ass song sequences, and the tacked on ending. Well, I guess it's not totally tacked on because it is in the original Oscar Wilde story, but it just feels like it didn't need to really be there. but I also agree with you that like the parts where it goes into the internal winter parts, or it's just like that is perfectly paced. It is well animated. I really like the character designs of the four aspects of winter. I think it's just really it's an interesting creative decision to like visualize them that way. Is like these four personifications of the different aspects of winter, and they're really fun. Uh, but yeah, it's just like it's either going too quickly or padding itself out needlessly. But also, not to spoil my ranking, but I did actually like this more than Evolution or Crunchbird, uh, because it is. I do like the animation. I think it is like, even though I agree with you that the children are a bit wonder bread, let's say, hey, it is like I said, I enjoy the animation in the winter time. I enjoy a lot of the, the in between segments with the different with how it animates itself. Oh, and I wasn't that bored by it. I felt like, even though there are parts of it that like kind of dragged on a little bit, the 30 minutes went by pretty quickly. It's not something like, Boy, Mole, Fox, and Horse, where I wanted to kill myself the whole time. And it was just painfully dreading like every single half-baked inspirational quote. Oh, is just like it's a standard children's story. It
Oh,
is very it's very standard. It is it's the kind of thing you would watch in school, well, just for no reason.
I
I feel
think
like you want to say something, Christoph.
Yeah, I think we have a major disagreement whether the 30 minutes went by quickly or not, because they just did not end for me. And although you're right, there are sections of the film where things happen where you say, "Oh, wait, what?" Like when it's suddenly spring again in his garden, or also at the beginning when we're told that the giant spent 7 years with a character called the Cornish ogre, and we see him. He looks a bit like a retired pirate, but we're not really told who he is and what his story is. And I kind of think maybe the Cornish ogre would have been a more interesting character than the Selfish Giant. But the things that are padded feel so incredibly padded and endless and just not interesting that I really felt like at times I felt like this doesn't end. And so maybe you're right. There's a weird mixture of rushing through some parts of the story and then spending time and song mid. I mean, more than 2 minutes are spent with the song about the giant building the wall.
Mhm.
Why couldn't that happen overnight, like the children suddenly being there in it's spring and he's loving them happening overnight? It's really the middle section is great. The middle section is perfect and should all be like the middle section, but everything before and after it.
I kind of like the song. I thought it was kind of nice.
Yeah, but you like songs all the time. I mean,
I do.
there are short films that consist of nothing but a catchy song to some awful animation. You love it, and the songs here aren't even that catchy. It's just no, not
just
for me. Sorry.
just dragging me.
Yeah, but you deserve it.
Okay, I guess so. Uh, yeah, I'll have fun talking about the cat came back whenever we get to that. I'm trying to think of other nominees like that. But yeah, uh, I think now we can talk about the ending, and I'll describe it. So we mentioned the little boy that the giant helped into the tree, and uh that is what first inspires the giant to stop being selfish. And also, after the giant does that, the other children see that, oh, the giant isn't going to be mean, and so they all come back to the garden. He knocks down his wall, and then he welcomes all the children into his garden. They play, and that's where normally a story would like this would end. However, so the children keep coming back, they keep playing, but the giant, he's built a sort of fondness for the small child who the first one he was nice to, but the child never comes back. Like, he was only there that one day, and none of the other children seem to know who he is or where he is or where he's gone. And so Giant grows old, keeps letting children, and years and years and years go by, and he grows fond of the winter again because he knows that it's just spring being resting or whatever. But then as he's very old, one day he looks out into his garden and he sees the child that he helped, and he goes out and he finds the child, but when he goes to him, he sees that the child has been hurt, and he's just like, who did this to you? And the specific way the child has been hurt is 2 nail marks through his hands and 2 nail marks through his feet. Does that sound familiar?
Ah,
And then the child is like these are not wounds of hate, but these are wounds of love. And the giant, I guess, is like, oh, why are you back so long? And it's just, after so long, and the kid is like, you were kind enough to let me play in your garden, and so I am here to take you to my garden of paradise. Yes, the child that the giant saved was Jesus Christ. And Jesus takes the giant to heaven, and that's how the story ends.
Yeah, you heard me groaning just as you were describing it. It's really, well, why is this suddenly such a hardcore Christian allegory where the child is literal Jesus and taking the giant to heaven because he did what exactly? I mean, it wasn't an unselfish action what the giant did. He just wanted winter to be over. And he saw, oh, the kids are here and it's spring, so I'm helping this kid to keep spring here. It's not that the giant suddenly became unselfish and did a great action. He just saw that it was better for him to do that. Also, there was a weird line when the giant was searching for the kid. When we don't know yet it's Jesus, and the narrator tells us the giant loved him best because he had kissed him. Eek.
The kid kissed the giant, so it's just
yeah. Still, it's a weird reason to give why the giant loved him the best. Also, we are being told that the little child has the stigmata like Jesus. We don't actually see them because apparently this film is not working in a medium where it's showing us what is happening, but has to tell us what is happening, at least in that portion of the film. I mean, why? Did the animator think maybe this is a bit much to actually show the child having the stigmata of Jesus? But then again, why do we have to tell us it has them? Who realized that this is a bit much and we don't need this? It's this ending is really it feels tacked on to a short that didn't need it. You could have the same point about it being good to be unselfish without having one of your characters being literal Jesus Christ taking your main character to literal paradise after his death.
Yeah. I'm going to use this opportunity to talk a bit about Reader's Digest because and I read a bit about when I forgot his name now, the guy who made Monroe and stuff. I don't know, but they have some weird censorship things. I'm wondering if it might be because of Reader's Digest that, like, oh, they can't show the actual stigmata or whatever. Maybe because of blood, maybe because of, it's too religious at that point, where it's like they want to maintain some kind of air of secularity, but even though it is, literally referencing Jesus, though not specifically saying his name. And it reminds me of this point where it's like this animator, he was going to do an adaptation of the Pied Piper of Hamelin for Reader's Digest for this series of animated shorts that was aired on TV. And at one point, I think the sponsor was General Mills for this episode or whatever. And so the animator, he's making, of course, the story about the man who takes the rats out of Hamelin, but the townspeople won't pay him, so he uses his pipe to get the children out and like as revenge or whatever. So he brings the storyboards or whatever to General Mills or to Reader's Digest, and then a Reader's Digest goes back to them and says, hey, so General Mills doesn't want to be associated with a story that mainly features rats. Could you perhaps change the rats to something else? And which is very funny considering the fact that, the whole point of the story is the rats. It is, and its original language, I believe it is called the rat catcher or something like that. So to take the rats out of the Pied Piper is a no-go, and so the animator left the project. And they didn't end up making it. Just a fun story I wanted to share.
I think the name you're looking for is Gene Deitch.
Yes. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot him. But yeah, I just wanted to share that story because I remember reading that when reading his book. And for this podcast, just researching the different episodes for his nominations. And yeah, that story just stuck with me.
Yeah, it must be something like this because it makes no sense to talk about the wounds in his hands and feet and not show them.
He is specifically covered by a blanket when this happens, which is like, did the giant bring out the blanket? Did he, like, maybe because he was winter at this time and he thought the child might be cold, but still, it just like, it specifically does cover up his hands and feet. So I think it might be a specific censorship thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the Selfish Giant. Anything else you'd like to say about this?
No, please no.
So yeah, now that we've gone through and talked about all three of this year's nominees, we will now rank them all. Christof, start us off with your number 3.
Crunchbird, my ass.
Crunchbird, my ass. Yes, truly, Crunchbird the short. Truly just poorly made in every way. It's an unfunny joke. Oh, it is just, but at the same time, it is something. It is so bad that it is good, and it is something just such a unique place in film history, in Oscar history, in animation history, even. And for that, I am somewhat grateful that it won, but also it did not deserve to win in any capacity. Number 2.
My number 2 is The Selfish Giant. The Selfish Giant has a very great middle, is padded in other parts, and has a very bizarre ending tagged onto it. So it's a strange mess. If it was only the middle, it would win in this lineup and win easily. But I cannot ignore the thing happening at the beginning and especially at the ending. So it's my number 2.
My number 2 is Evolution. Like I said before, it's a well animated short. However, it spends a lot of its time trying to be funny, and I just don't think it's all that funny. It's kind of boring, but it's still not. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's fine. It's just not something I will particularly remember or care to watch again, unless I do another podcast episode or something, or if I want to go back and rewatch the nominees again in like 10, 15 years. Who knows? But yeah, number 1.
Yeah, my number 1 is Evolution. As you said, it's fine. The only reason it's winning is because I like the other 2 shorts even less than it. It should be so much better than it is. And I mean, the last time I was on your show, we were gushing about all 3 nominated shorts. All 3 shorts we're talking about last time are so much better than anything we're talking about this time. The only reason I'm giving Evolution the win is its competition is worse.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of my story for The Selfish Giant. However, I think I like this more than you liked Evolution. Because
Probably.
These kind of storybook shorts are a staple of this category because one of the main things that short animation studios were allowed to do at this time was make educational and storybook content for schools and libraries and things like that. And so you get a lot of nominees like this that are 30 minutes long, almost exactly, and just tell a children's story. And it's just like, there are some that are great like this. There are some that are awful, like The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And this, well, I I don't mean to say that this is great. This is not great. It is fine. It is good. It is also a bit forgettable outside of that really insane ending, which I'm surprised I didn't remember after the first time watching it.
Neither did I. I blocked it. I had blocked it from my memory, and also, it was originally written by Oscar Wilde.
It was
do
Oscar
not
Wilde.
expect Oscar Wilde, the Oscar Wilde, to write something this trite.
I imagine it must have been a paycheck kind of thing, or like he was commissioned to be like, oh, write a children's story. Like
and
a lot
make it hardcore Christian.
Yeah. I imagine that must be the same story for maybe like Gerald Potterton or something, just where it's like the only way to be profitable is to make children's content. So he had to make children's content.
I mean, Oscar Wilde famously not that devout.
Exactly. But he wrote this and it got made into a short film, and I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was all right. It's not the worst way to spend 30 minutes, although you would disagree with that point.
I would. Well, there are worse ways to spend 30 minutes, but if given the choice, this is not one of the options I would take.
Would you rather watch The Selfish Giant again or watch The Crunchbird 15 times?
Do I have to watch The Crunchbird 15 times in a row?
Yes. I'm saying, like, to spend 30 minutes, were you given the choice to watch The Selfish Giant again or watch The Crunchbird 15 times, which would you pick?
Well, I would pick The Selfish Giant because at least The Selfish Giant has a great middle.
Okay. So before we end our show, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share, Christof, or anything you'd like to promote?
There's only one thing I want to say here, and this is Crunchbird, my ass.
Okay. Well, thank you, Christof, for coming on the show. And thank you, listener, for tuning in. This has been the Short Podcast about short films. Until next time, goodbye.